Well, hello and welcome to Straight Talk, a public affairs program sponsored by the Midland Cultural Center here in Simcoe County. My name is Doug Maund and I'm the moderator of Straight Talk. We're delighted today to welcome a new sponsor to our program. Brampton Brick is joining us as season sponsor for Straight Talk. And we extend our sincere thanks to Brampton Brick for supporting this program and our community program. Our topic today is cybercrime, a keystroke away. Now, Canadians now live, obviously, in a completely interconnected world, and we rely on digital technology for basically all aspects of our lives, and in business and in government and all organizations. But this dependency, as we're beginning to recognize, is coming with an increased vulnerability to a growing risk of cyber threats. Cybercrime includes a broad range of criminal activity, and it causes billions of financial losses to individuals, businesses, and government every year. The statistics I saw indicate that that might be as high as 600 billion worldwide, which is a staggering figure. And the perpetrators are increasingly sophisticated and very difficult to apprehend. So the question we're going to address today is, how vulnerable are we as a society? Now, in this program, we're going to be talking about just what cybercrime means in 2021 and what sort of impact it's having on all of us as Canadians. And most importantly, how we can protect ourselves and our families and our businesses from cybercrime. And we're very fortunate today to have welcomed a panel of experts who really devote their lives to protecting Canadians from the threat of cybercrime. And I'm very much looking forward to hearing from all of them. So I'd like to introduce them and thank them for attending. First of all, I'm going to introduce Detective Sergeant Vern Crowley. Vern, could you just say hello? Vern is the head of the OPP's cybercrime investigations team, and he's responsible for promoting collaboration between law enforcement, government, and the private sector in the cybersecurity area. Vern has served with the OPP for over 30 years, and he has led digital evidence investigations since 1995. Thank you for joining us, Vern.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks.
I'd next like to introduce Sumit Bhatia. There he is. Hello, Sumit. Sumit is the Director of Communication at Rogers Ryerson's Cyber Secure Catalyst Accelerator. That's a mouthful. I'm getting my mouth around it, Vern. Or Sumit, rather. And that organization, which I hope to hear a lot about, has a focus on business and government cybersecurity. Sumit has extensive experience as a business strategist in helping organizations embrace technology safety. And thank you for being here, sir.
Thanks, Doug. Good to be here.
And by no means least, our third guest is Bill VanGorder. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you.
Bill is the Chief Policy Advisor for CARP, the Canadian Association for Retired Persons, and he's been with CARP for, I think, just over 15 years. He has extensive experience in helping older Canadians who often find themselves prime targets for cybercrime. And Bill, in fact, founded CARP's Fraud ABCs to help seniors protect themselves from fraud, and particularly cyber-type fraud. So thank you for being here, Bill, as well.
Happy to be here.
So let's begin. I'm going to ask all of the panel members to perhaps talk a little bit about what they do professionally and help our viewers understand the scope of just what cybercrime is in Canada today and the work they're doing to protect us as Canadians. So I think we seem to have assembled here our own team of Avengers who are helping us to protect ourselves against this threat. So I'm going to call on Detective Sergeant Crowley. And Vern, if you could say a few words, please, that would be great.
Yeah, so it's funny. In the world today, cyber seems to be mentioned across all different topics. And unfortunately, when you put the word cyber, it causes confusion. And no difference really when it comes to law enforcement. We find that the traditional crimes, fraud, threatening, those types of crimes are facilitated by technology today because we are so immersed in it with the use of the World Wide Web and the internet. So my team, the Cybercrime Investigations team for the Ontario Provincial Police, is based out of Orillia, Ontario. We have a province-wide mandate to invest true cyber crimes. And by that, what I mean is where technology is the target of the crime. So think of our computers and or the data that resides upon them are targeted and are the victim. They don't have a voice. Whereas cyber-enabled crimes, they're the online scams that happen and are very prevalent in our world today. They use technology. They use the internet to facilitate their crimes. And it's because of the way that we use technology. Cyber criminals are using it for the obfuscation, that is to hide their identity and who it is. And there's a lot of vulnerabilities. We rely upon our technology every day. We take for granted that when we turn on a light switch, that it's going to work. A lot of us don't realize in the background in our industrial control systems that look after our clean water, our light, our power, transportation grids, that they are all computerized controlled. And as such, we all need to take an interest in not only the data that we have on our computers, but a society interest in cybersecurity as a whole, because we're so integrated and use it today, whether we realize it or not. And our team does the investigations, and that is the attribution aspect. That is the who did it. And then we'll work with victims, be they small, medium businesses, seniors, our youth in society today. We'll work with them. If they've been victimized, we need to know about it, because honestly, one of the biggest challenges for law enforcement is the lack of reporting. So we need to get that message out. If you've been a victim of cybercrime where there's been a level of jeopardy, your data's been compromised, you've lost financially, please make sure you report to your police force of jurisdiction.
Before we go on, Vern, can I just ask, why do you think underreporting is a problem? What's the reason for that?
There's a whole host of reasons. For businesses, it may be reputation. They don't want it to be known that they've been found vulnerable, because that may have implications on their customer base. For individuals, it might be an embarrassment factor. It might be a small amount. If it's financially a couple $100s, they're not going to worry about it. I guarantee you, for your listening audience here, if you were to ask the question, do you believe cybercrime is a problem? You would get an overwhelming response, yes. If you were to put the question to your audience, how big of a problem is cybercrime? Well, then you'll end up with a bit of a pause. And the reason for that is a lot of it doesn't get reported. And unless it gets reported, we're not able to actually say how big and prevalent it is. But I can tell you from the OPP perspective, it's an ongoing challenge and is very prevalent across all sectors and across all age groups.
Well, thank you, Vern. We'll look forward to getting into that more detail. So, Sumit, could you tell us about your organization and what your focus is on this issue?
Yeah, thanks, Doug. So I'm Sumit Bhatia. I'm the Director of Innovation and Policy at the Rogers Cybersecure Catalyst. And under my portfolio, I manage our business accelerator for cybersecurity startups and scale-ups, our public policy exchange, and our small, medium business initiatives. Now, let me start by giving you some context to our organization, because I believe it's important to see the public sector, private sector, and academia coming together to support the Canadian cyber ecosystem. So at the Catalyst, we are a center of excellence in cybersecurity. We function as one of the national centers of cybersecurity, and our focus is on 5 key areas of operations and training and certification, where we deliver both training for corporate purposes, so to board members, senior executives, different levels of management. We also run a training program where we certify students that are looking to reskill and upskill, whether shape their careers in cybersecurity or upskill their careers in cybersecurity. And that program is delivered to 2 to 3 groups for women in cyber, displaced workers in cyber, and to new Canadians in cyber. So we're really trying to bring diversity and a diversity of thought and skill sets into the cyber ecosystem. On the other side, we've got a cyber range that we just launched, which is a cutting-edge simulation-based training environment. I'm sure Vern is familiar with that, but it's typically been accessible to limited groups, enterprises, and to people doing this work. But we are trying to open that up and make it more accessible to a larger audience so that they can continue to see how this work is expanding. We also do support for applied research and development. So we work with businesses on that front. As I mentioned, we have a business accelerator where we are bringing in cybersecurity companies and nurturing them so that they can compete at a global level. We've got a public policy arm where we do a lot of work at the cross section of privacy and cybersecurity, because for a lot of people, including members of this audience, privacy and cybersecurity are very closely linked together. And we think about data in those terms. And lastly is public awareness work, where we have built programs for small, medium businesses. We've launched a ton of resources for kindergarten to grade 12, and we continue to do work to support teachers and educators, as well as in the process of launching a program for seniors as well. At the heart of our work is really the mission to help grow the cybersecurity ecosystem within Canada and make it compete at a global level. But I think bigger than that is empowering citizens and organizations alike, because this is a shared responsibility. And as Vern pointed out, we all have to work in this together. And I think some of the biggest gaps are a function of a lack of education and I think a unified voice so that the messaging is consistent and not confusing for a lot of people. So that's just a quick context of our organization. I think, Doug, both yourself and Vern talked a little bit about how technology is profoundly shaping our lives. It continues to become ubiquitous. We see widespread networks, new devices, innovative applications, and we're trying to harness the benefits of it. This has changed the modalities of how we do business, how we discover information, how we build relationships, how we work, play, and engage with each other. And I think when we think about that, this is an exciting reality, but this rapid technological shift creates uncertainty and vulnerability that is all of our responsibility to try and understand and manage in the way it impacts our lives, both professionally and personally. And when you think of the sheer number of devices, systems, and platforms we use in today's world, you can imagine how daunting that task can be and why we all need to participate in it collectively. But it's achievable. And I think cybersecurity is both an opportunity as well as the work that we have to do. So I think we have to stop thinking about it as a fear-based system and actually think about it as something that provides us additional opportunities as well.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I'm sure that'll provoke a lot of questions as we go along. Sumit, obviously you and your organization are filling a great need, but what's your sense of the general state of public awareness of cybersecurity generally, either business or as individuals per se? What's your instinct at this stage?
I think, we've come a long way and we have a long way to go. And Doug, that's a function of the work that lies before us. Cybercrime and cybercriminals have evolved. It's become extremely sophisticated. And in fact, the perception of one guy sitting in a basement in a hoodie has changed significantly. We are talking about organized units across various countries working together. And I think we have a lot of work to do. And there's a lot of amazing work happening. I think what's important on a personal level is for people to recognize that the vulnerability is a function of human error the majority of times. And the only way to prevent human error is to educate ourselves and understand the potential vulnerabilities our actions can create and what our systems create. And so in that sense, I think we have a lot of work to do to educate people. And once again, I say we have to have a common voice. I think there's a lot of organizations trying to do the good work, but I think we need to consolidate this information and speak with a unified lens.
Well, that's great. And we certainly hope to, in a small way, to help educate our audience about a lot of these issues. That's so important and timely. So thank you, Sumit. So Bill, CARP does so much good work for much of our audience are seniors, and you keep us so well informed. Tell us about how you became aware of this and some of the concrete things that you and your organization are doing.
Well, I've been involved in fraud, especially as perpetrated towards seniors, and especially financial fraud for over 15 years. One of the things that CARP tries to do with our 325,000 members across the country and our 27 chapters is do the education that both Vern and Summit have been talking about, because there is a tremendous lack of knowledge among older Canadians of even what we're talking about tonight. And 10 years ago, when we would offer some of our programs, when we came to what we then called computer fraud, people, most seniors just said, "Well, I don't use one of those. It's not something that I'm," and they weren't concerned about. One of the only good things about COVID, in my estimation, is the fact that it's brought many older Canadians into the cyber world, into technology, into online, kicking and screaming they've been, but they're there now and quite comfortable on Zoom and other platforms. The bad thing about it is they still don't really understand what they're dealing with, and they have some very varied notions about cybercrime and the risks that they face, both financially, to their own privacy, and even exposing themselves or opening themselves to people that they don't want to online. So what they tend to do is either be very trusting and very open, or they go the opposite way and aren't able to take the full advantage of the technology that's there. So what we're trying to do through our programs is give them the opportunity to not only learn about it, but be comfortable. We know because we talk to them at our sessions and after our sessions. Often people will come up to us after a class. This was pre-COVID, when we could do that, and they would tell us their story of when they were defrauded or ran into some kind of cybercrime. And of course, we always ask, well, did you report it? And because we've talked during the class about the value of reporting, so that organizations like Vern's and Summit can track it and do something about it. And invariably they say, "Oh, no, I was too embarrassed to do that." They don't want to tell their family. They don't want to tell their kids that they did it. And it's not, it's the very well educated. I was talking just this morning with a senior who came out of the computer industry, worked for some of the biggest companies in the country, and this weekend he got caught by an online scheme that was phishing for his credit card, and he actually gave his credit card over the internet before he thought more about it, realized what he'd done, canceled the credit card. So all he had was $1 that they took off his account, because that's how they check to see if it's valid. And but this is a man who I go to when I have trouble getting my cell phone to operate properly. So and somebody like, I don't know that he would have told anybody other than me as a friend that he had done that. So what we're trying to do is open up this discussion, have people talk about it, and also make sure that our members, who tend in many ways to be the opinion leaders in their communities, to make sure that they're also talking to their friends about cyber crimes and understanding them. So at the church group, at the bowling club, the bridge club, whatever, they're passing on that information. There's a huge job to be done, and even though I've been involved for so many years in all areas of financial abuse, I don't think it's ever been worse, and I don't feel we're beginning to scratch the surface on really helping people understand, and to understand fraud, to recognize it, to report it, and then to stop it from happening. In our estimation, and I don't know what Vern's or some statistics will show, but we really think it's growing, that there are more people, especially seniors now, because they're more involved online.
And COVID probably has compounded the problem. Would you agree?
Well, it has, because they don't have the close by help. They don't have the grandkids around to caution them, to help them, and they're forced to use a technology that it makes them very anxious to begin with. They're because they don't really understand it. They're afraid to use it, yet they have to use it, and there's a lack of understanding of even what's safe use and what isn't. I don't know how many times I've heard in business, and my wife runs one of those small businesses, people refusing to use their credit card or refusing to give the 3-digit security number on the back of the card, even though that's the card that the number the finance companies use to verify the card. So without giving that number, they can't make their purchase. Yet they're so afraid to give that information that it creates a real problem for them, and then they're stuck. They're already isolated, feeling cut off from the world. This kind of thing just makes them feel more isolated.
Okay. Well, lots to talk about, Bill, and particularly we'll have some questions about some of the do's and don'ts, and also we hope to give people access to there's reams of material out there in terms of what they should do and who they should talk to. So thanks very much for that. So look, let's just start an interactive discussion here, gentlemen. And I think what I'd like to begin with is talking about just the broad file on what cybercrime is, the types of malefactor activity that we're seeing, and some of the new things. People may not even know, listening to this program, what terms like phishing really means. So, I mean, could we do some examples of how broad these type of activities? We don't need just a categorization or a list, but what's actually going on out there that that people should be aware of personally? Maybe I'd start with you, Vern. Can you tell our audience something about that, if you could?
Yeah, so the majority because our mandate is to investigate those true cyber crimes, one of the things that we're dealing with more often than not is ransomware. And this is attacking our small, medium businesses, where malware gets into the system. Normally it's through a phishing email. It could be through remote desktop protocol, that is allowing someone remotely, someone out of town or a city that's responsible for IT, rather than traveling to the various entities, they can sit at their desk, remote into the computers if they're sitting in front of it. Yeah. These cyber criminals are exploiting those vulnerabilities, or they're really good at the phishing emails. And when an employee at a business opens up these emails, it allows further malware to get into the system. It'll enumerate the entire network, look for all the valuable information, encrypt it, and more often than not today, steal it. The level of victimization is super high. And if they're able to get the backups as well as the operating data, a lot of these organizations are left in a very precarious position. And unfortunately, today, a lot of organizations end up paying because there's no real good way of getting that operating data back. And it has a very high level of victimization. You can just imagine in small town Ontario, an organization that employs 150 to 200 people, and if they're facing possibly going out of business, not only does it affect all the employees, but it affects the community as a whole. So we're dealing with that. The most prevalent investigations that we assist on with our local crime units is the online fraud, the scams. And as Bill talked about, a lot of our seniors are being victimized. They're at home alone. Romance scams have definitely gone up a lot. These are scams where, a lot of our seniors are lonely, and because they're isolated. And if they're able to communicate with someone, be it over the phone or even over the computer, they build up that level of trust and confidence to where they get to the point where they'll start sending money. And as Bill mentioned before, these people that have started to get into this trust relationship, they believe it to be true, and they won't tell their family members. And the victimization goes on for a long time before they realize that the dollar value is very significant before family members find out. And that's only one. We've heard of the CRA scams, the job scams. So the internet and these online scams, this online fraud is very prevalent, and it does make up a lot of the caseload that we assist with. Denial of service attacks, I think we'll see that a lot more in the future. I can't predict it, but as Sumit said, all these devices that are basically have an IP address and are able to connect, security isn't necessarily part of their makeup. And cyber criminals are creating these botnets where they can harness all these compromised devices and point it at a web server who is just then overwhelmed. I mean, we talk about all of our critical systems. Think about our 911 systems.
Right.
They work on voice over IP. And if you were able to harness that they attacked it at the protocol level, we have to be very careful and make sure, and I'm talking just overall now about where we move in the future, these devices, if they can be pointed at a particular server and overwhelm it, if we rely on those systems, it could cause a very bad day for us. So as we move forward, and I'm not trying to scare, it's just we rely on technology so much that it really does become everybody's responsibility.
And I use the term phishing, and you referred to it, and spear phishing. Just briefly, what is that?
Yeah, so phishing, I'm going to take a step back. So really, we're talking about social engineering. That is tricking someone into doing something they normally wouldn't do. That's the term social engineering. So giving up your password, you normally wouldn't do it, but they trick you into doing it. Phishing, generally via email, is where they construct an email to convince you to give up information you normally wouldn't do. And in a general sense, phishing is a general. That is, they won't name you specifically, dear customer, something like that. A spear phish, on the other hand, is where they target you, and that's where the spear comes from. They name you. They've done their research on social media. They found out some information that you will agree with because it's something that is identified to you as being true, and they'll craft it in such a way that you believe them to be actually in a trust position where they have information about you and trick you into giving that information specifically, and that's a spear phish.
Okay. So many things to talk about. Sumit, what are the biggest threats, the most exotic, new, insidious threats that businesses should have to worry about in 2021 here in Canada, do you think?
Yeah, I think, Doug, to everything Vern said, and specifically around social engineering, because I think some of the tactics that are being used constitute the volume of attacks that we see. Now, there's some really interesting things happening. And I think that's, when I say the word interesting, I use it loosely, not exciting, just interesting in trying to figure out. But, there's things like something we refer to as cryptojacking, where—
Cryptojacking, sir?
Cryptojacking, that's right. And this is where hackers or attackers are using your systems and your system's resources for the purposes of, let's say, mining cryptocurrency, for instance, or sometimes simply using your systems for a purpose that you did not authorize. So that's an interesting form that we're seeing because it goes unnoticed. If somebody doesn't get affected by something, they don't tend to notice it or report it, but their systems are being used and they are vulnerable at any point in time. The other thing we often see is something that small, medium businesses often encounter, which is business email compromise, which essentially is when a particular person in an organization is targeted with an email that might look like it's coming from somebody that they know. It could be a vendor or a supplier requesting payment on an invoice. And because you cannot tell who it is, somebody who has the authority to grant a financial transaction or approve a financial transaction can fall for it, and as a result, transfer money or funds over to this person on the other end. So that's another thing to be mindful of. There's something we refer to as man-in-the-middle attack. And man-in-the-middle attack means that you could be having a regular conversation over email or over text or another form of communication, and what you don't know is that somebody's actually observing this transaction of information going through and can plant themselves in the middle and continue that conversation because they have some history, because they've been observing you. But now they can pretend to be the other party and request additional information from you. So there's, lots of, like I said, interesting things happening. And, not to forget, of course, cyber espionage, where there's a much larger game at play where hackers are accessing government or company data, but these are coordinated nation state attacks. So there's a lot of sophistication that we see. But I'll also just add, Doug, and especially around what Bill and Vern pointed out, the purpose of these things and talking about these things is not just fear, it's awareness, right? And I just want to create that separation. There were over 330 million people across the world that were attacked in 2020. That number was even greater in 2016 and 2017, and we're actually doing better. But why I say that is, for people listening, this is not an opportunity to feel guilty or feel ashamed in any way. This is happening to the best of us. This is happening to large enterprises and organizations that have very sophisticated technology. So conversations like this, I would request that not be taken to induce fear, but in fact see as an opportunity to learn about how some of these things are taking place so we can do something about it.
Well, I hope we will have enough time to explore solutions, even general solutions, in terms of the sort of best ways to avoid situations, and also what we should arm our devices with as a basic standard to try to protect ourselves. I'm interested in who's particularly vulnerable. Obviously, Bill talked about the senior population, which I count myself one proudly. But are there other demographics that are particularly vulnerable apart from the retired or seniors? Gentlemen, I don't know, anybody, if you'd like to.
Well, I could certainly begin just briefly to speak to that, because, when we started the ABCs of Fraud program over 15 years ago now, it was aimed entirely at older adults. And gradually over the years, we've seen more and more of these crimes perpetrated on younger people. So now we're dealing just as much with the 30 and 40-year-olds as we are with 65 and 75-year-olds. And this is in all areas. So and that's the big change that I've seen in the last 15 years.
But what about very younger people? They're, of course, more technically sophisticated. I mean, all of us had the experience of our tech support moving away. Ours did almost 40 years ago, which was a great loss. But the very younger people, some of the youngsters in high school, while they're good with the technology, perhaps a lack of world experience, they're very vulnerable to all kinds of malfactors on social media. Obviously, there's areas that your OPP gets involved with, Vern, that's a great concern, and there are parents watching, and they're looking for ways to perhaps protect their children.
Yeah, absolutely. The youth today are what I would consider power users, in that they're very good at using the apps that they use on their phone, and more on their phone than they are on their computer systems. Mm-hmm. They're always very keen to try new things, and cyber criminals are very much aware of this. And a lot of the apps that are downloaded, especially if they jailbreak, or that is open up their phone to allow in applications that don't come from qualified or verified sources, and they'll put them in, and the cyber criminals use what's known as Trojans. And these could be games or a piece of software that looks legitimate, and they install it on their phones. And the problem with all the apps today that we're using on our phones is that it can track. And a lot of the apps now have root access. So that is your GPS location, access to your microphone, access to your camera, access to your contacts. And for our youth today, they need to be aware of those sort of things and the best security protocols they could put on that. Now, the device security is one thing. The other thing I would say for the youth, when it comes to social media, watch out what you put on there and be kind. A lot of times, our youth are very quick to criticize, but remember, what comes around goes around, and that information that you post could be there for a very long time and then used against you. They're very quick to react and post and not realize possibly the implications that could have. And I'll just say one other sort of to our senior members. I'm sure Bill will know this because I've had a lot of chance to speak to our seniors. They'll go on vacation, although maybe not in COVID times, and they'll be posting, here I am at our Florida place for a couple months, which then, if it's open to the public, would tell the bad guys, well, if they live over here, that means like who's in the house, and if the house is open. So we have to sort of just be cognizant of what we put out there, because I can tell you that the cyber criminals spend all of their time on the recon phase. That is finding out as much as they can about their victim before they go in and do whatever nefarious things that they want to do.
Okay. Bill, you were talking about the embarrassment factor, some of the clients that you deal with.
Yeah.
And I think that's extremely important to talk about. And, I wasn't going to say this, but I mentioned to Vern at the outset that I'm a phishing victim myself, and I've been around the justice system for going on 45 years. And it can be so innocent how they can get at you. And if there's a great website for tech support for someone that is not tech savvy, and when you get into that, how they can manipulate the anxieties that they have a wonderful grasp on it's almost extraordinary to behold. And I've heard a lot of stories since my own experience. Maybe, Bill, you could give some examples of the sort of situations that people should be leery of, and how they can protect themselves against this, or at least be alert to this type of situation.
Well, and it's having people understand, not only admitting, but understanding how they could be open to these things. And one of the reasons that the ABCs of Fraud program that CARP operates has been successful, I believe, and has operated throughout the years, is when we first began over 15 years ago, we were going out making presentations. At that point, the police forces weren't doing it as much as they are now, but we did work with community policing and others making these presentations. But when we made presentations, the overwhelming attitude of the people we were talking to was, oh, well, those stupid people, how could they be caught by something like that? I'd never be caught like that. So we changed our approach, and now we send our presenters out in pairs, and they role play how these can happen. And in terms of cyber crimes, they can still take both sides of it as if they were at their computers working on it. But by role playing it, our audiences then say, "Oh, okay, I see how somebody could be caught by that, and how slick it is." And that's what gets the conversation going. And that's when we start to hear from them their stories about how they personally have been caught.
Interesting. Can people get hold of that material from CARP if they were?
Yes, yeah. They can either go directly to the ABCs of Fraud .ca website, or they can go to the CARP.ca website and just search on frauds and scams, and they'll find the information there. Although we do find that coming to presentations, or these days going to attending webinar presentations, is a great way. We are cooperating right across the country a lot with police forces who are now taking this issue very seriously, and other professionals, people like Summit. And we know that most of the universities we deal with across the country have some form of security, either a public program, or they have their own very well-versed security people who are happy to speak to other groups. Our difficulty as the layman in this field, and not the professionals like Vern and Summit, is that it's such an ever-changing I've learned a couple of things tonight that I don't think I've heard of before, because it's an ever-changing area that you really have to keep up with, and we have encouraged all groups that work with seniors to make this a top priority, especially during these COVID days, for all the reasons that we mentioned before.
So I apologize. I know we're jumping around a little bit, but there's so many things of great interest to our audience here. There's some broader issues in terms of this topic, in terms of the danger to society. Whether we are technophobic and resist technology or not, it runs our life nowadays. And one of the implications of cybercrime is lack of faith in the systems that we rely on, and concern about things like privacy. Remember privacy? It's almost a concept that's quaint, but very important to us as individuals and as a society. So I know we wanted to pivot and talk about something more positive than fear, but what about those broader issues? You must give this some thought sometimes.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Doug. I think it's an ongoing conversation in our circles because cybercrime affects us in some very profound ways. And one of the things that I've always said is, things like privacy, the reason they're important is not because we can clearly articulate how it affects us. There's a lot of people out there that say, yeah, I use my phone, but what are they going to take anyway? I really don't have much to hide. I'm a decent person, and I do everything I need to. The challenge with privacy is that when we know we are being watched, we become a different people, right? And that's just a function of how privacy operates. We want to make sure that we feel that we have the autonomy and the independence to make our decisions. We are not influenced by disinformation and misinformation that is spread through some of these sources, which is also a result of some cybercrime, which is, promoting misinformation. We hear of, the promotion of hate crime and discrimination taking place as a result of this, influence of voices. And at a more profound level, sometimes it's the way we consume information. It is the way we operate in what we term as filter bubbles, which is information that is surrounding us is limited to the sources that we allow for it to supply that information. These are our friends, or likes that we've offered to certain posts, or YouTube videos that we've watched. And before we know it, these algorithms, or people who are sometimes manipulating these algorithms, are very quick to harness the power of and make sure that we don't operate outside that knowledge bubble. And then, of course, there's larger things. When we think about seniors, one of the most profound effects that it has is the financial impact, the transactional impact. We're talking about life savings here. We're talking about a legacy that we've built, that whether it's for our own personal use, or whether it's for our families that we want to leave behind as a legacy, that is significant impact to some of these groups. So I think, these are all impacts that we are noticing, we're monitoring, and that is what we're fighting against, because it has the potential to create a state of fear. And of course, we're trying to push back against that. But all of these things, when compounded, when we think about surveillance, when we think about, our lack of faith in public policy at times, the limitation of knowledge we're getting, these filter bubbles, we start operating from a place of fear. And I think that fundamentally changes people and culture. And we have to be wary of that.
But you're with Ryerson. I mean, how good a job is the education system in Canada doing generally in educating the next generation about being savvy and having the sense of what's good and what's bad about these tools they love to use?
I think that, conversations like this are demonstrated of how different groups are coming together. And I think our academic institutions are certainly seeing the value in it. We are seeing new programs being launched for kids of all ages, youth of all ages, for small, medium businesses. for seniors, for teachers, so that they can pass that knowledge on. And universities are certainly trying to jump in and also be able to create careers in cybersecurity, so that at the same time as education, we are building our resilience as a workforce. So there's a lot of work happening in this space, Doug. I think, it goes back to we have spent years adopting behavior that is counterproductive. And so what's happening is that we are sort of having to retrain people on how to operate when they enforce technology. And this is not just seniors learning technology for the first time. This is actually, youth who've created behavioral patterns and habits that are not always cyber secure or other forms. So I think we have a lot of work to do, but I see a lot of good work happening out of academic institutions.
And I'm going to underline the words career opportunity that you used, because that's not lost on some of the younger people watching, I think.
Well, I'll just add to that note, 40% gap in cybersecurity skill set demand. So if you're considering new careers, if you're looking to get into STEM fields and technology, cybersecurity is a budding area. We certainly need all the help we can get. And there's a 40% skills gap in this space that we're looking to fill soon.
Well, your group has an important role to play. So thank you, Sumit. I have a number of questions. I'm not going to have time for all of them, but I'm going to get to some of the questions that came into the Midland Cultural Center over the last few weeks. And I'll just throw it out to this knowledgeable group. And one of the questions is, how secure is it to let my MacBook store my passwords? Anyone want to take a shot at that?
So
yeah, go ahead, Vern.
no, so that's a general question. I guess the answer is, how are they being stored on the computer? I can advocate one of the things that all your listeners can do to help protect themselves is use a password manager. There's a lot of good ones out there. Just Google password manager. And what a password manager will do will actually help you with all those different passwords. I'm sure if you're like myself, you log into more than one place that requires a password. And we always advocate long passwords with complexity, upper, lowercase, special characters. Of course, the longer, the better. Of course, we always say try to switch it up every so often, because if there is a data breach with your user credentials, they would use that legitimate password then against you. But if you change it up over time, then that historic password's no good anymore. So we keep saying all these things, and this is where a password manager will help. All your passwords that you put in there are encrypted, and you only need to know the one, the master password. Now, don't forget it, because it's the key to unlock all of them. And if even your computer was compromised, because all that data is encrypted, it's useless to whoever gets it. So a password manager, and the other thing I just want to say on top of that is two-factor authentication. So across any type of site, be it social media, financial institutions, what have you, if you can employ two-factor or multi-factor authentication, you are going to take away the low-hanging fruit for the cyber criminal and make it that much harder for them to compromise you and your systems. So I guess coming round circle, as long as the passwords are stored in a proper manner, and of which a password manager will help you, you should be in good shape.
Okay.
So you're suggesting, though, that just to save them on your computer without a password manager is not necessarily a good idea.
Well, it depends, right? So a lot of our devices have been found to be easily compromised. And if they're being stored in plain text, and they do get into your computer system, if they see a password or a file that says list of my passwords, they'll be going for it pretty quick.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Okay. Here's another question. I have 3 Google puck-like Wi-Fi points boosters in my home, as well as Wi-Fi cameras, both inside and outside. How vulnerable am I to easy pickings from malefactors?
I'll jump in there, Doug. So a lot of the newer routers, and it sounds like what they've got there is a newer class of router, typically referred to as a mesh network. A lot of the fundamental basic underlying security framework in them is actually quite strong, but you have responsibility of setting it up. And I think it comes down to how you have set it up. The other piece to that question was around cameras. Cameras are smart devices. Often these are, what we refer to as Internet of Things or smart devices that are connected to a network. And often we don't get a chance to install software, security software on these devices. So they are much more vulnerable. So in order to protect them, how they connect to our network becomes an important part of that process. So if we haven't spent time in actually customizing and tailoring that network, in setting some strong protocols in place around how different devices connect to that network, in some cases, we even recommend, if you are using smart devices, set up a parallel network, a guest network that accesses your smart devices so that if it does get infiltrated, it does not impact other parts of your system. So there is a level of customization required. But I'll also say some of these devices have some of these pre-built. So it's really a matter of going through the user guide and making sure that you've touched on all of the things that they recommend and taken all the steps that you can to make sure that you're secure.
I had another question, and this may be for you, Vern, but that someone believes that they read somewhere that there's that 95 or more percent of cybercrime reported, that's reported cybercrime, is not resolved because of the difficulties with identification and apprehension. So the question is a little provocative, but what chance do I have to protect myself if the chance of solving cases like that is so low?
So I guess, first of all, it would depend on the type of cybercrime, but they're right. So law enforcement's role is the attribution. That is the who did it. But, the amount of resources that law enforcement has is finite. And, this education and awareness that cybercrime is a problem and is an issue. And as I mentioned before, how big of an issue. So the reporting is the first piece. So reporting it to law enforcement, we can't help. We can't investigate if we don't even know that it's happening. But once reported, I can tell you in my 30 plus years of policing, I have never seen such great collaboration as I have when it comes to cybercrime. We, the OPP as an entity, can't do this alone. And we are in constant communication with our law enforcement partners, be they municipal, federal, or even international. I'm on the phone a lot with the FBI, Homeland Security, Europol, the NCA. So when these crimes get reported, we take what's known as the indicators of compromise. That is the monikers or the email addresses or Bitcoin wallet IDs, what have you. We then share that information with other law enforcement. We don't necessarily share the details of the victims, just that we have an investigation with these indicators of compromise. And what we've been seeing now, and what we're starting to have success in, as they get reported, we link them up to these other investigations, because rest assured, the victim is not alone, that these are happening elsewhere. And as we start to that collaboration process, we are getting greater and greater success.
So I'd love to read the ABCs of fraud protection into the record, Bill. We don't have that sort of time, but I've certainly been edging people towards reaching out to CARP to get that. But what would your message be to people that are frightened of the unknown? What's the main takeaway you think they should have tonight in terms of arming themselves and in getting help from more savvy individuals in our society to help them?
Well, as we are learning, technology is here with us to stay. So what we urge people to do is learn as much as they can to educate themselves, consult with whomever they can that they can trust to help them understand. Make sure that you report, as Vern said, any incidents, even those that you're able to avoid, because this will help the authorities be able to gather the information to protect others. But most of all, remember that, as you've heard tonight, this is a huge problem. You're not alone. you're not the only person that's being victimized this way. So don't be embarrassed, and make sure that you let everyone who should know what's happened, learn from that to protect yourself and your friends and neighbors and family in the future.
Okay. Thank you, Bill. And Sumit, what's the positive takeaway here that I wanted to give you a moment just to get that in, because you quite rightly said that is so important to this discussion.
Yeah, absolutely, Doug. I think we're seeing the cybersecurity realm grow. We need more talent. There's opportunities, and there's some exciting work to be done. The cybersecurity as an industry, one, requires a lot of diversity of thinking, of skill set, of backgrounds, and that's a function of, that's how we target attackers, because they come from diverse backgrounds in all areas. So I really encourage people with those diverse skill sets to consider those careers. We certainly think there's an opportunity there. I think businesses have to remember that as you start to protect yourself and start to become more cyber secure, that's also an opportunity, because you can differentiate yourself. Your customers trust you more. Your supply chain partners trust you more. Your vendors want to work with you more. So demonstrating that you've taken the steps is actually an opportunity to differentiate yourself as well. And lastly, I think this is, as Vern pointed out, this is something that we need to do together. And, despite all our efforts, we are going to make mistakes, but the best remedy for human error is education. And what we need to do is share this information with each other, talk to it about it with our parents, our family members, our friends, our networks, and really support each other, because this is not going away anytime soon. But as a unified group, we can tackle this. And, I think we should feel better about that.
Well, that is a great note to end this program on, because sadly we're out of time, gentlemen. So I thank you so much to all of you for taking your time to share your expertise. Sergeant Crowley, Sumit Bhatia, and Bill VanGorder, thank you for joining us and for your preparation for this meeting, and for working so hard to protect us in the jobs you do every day. My thanks to Rogers and our producer, Ron Clark, as well as our research committee for Straight Talk, led by Gord McKay. And again, special thanks to our new season sponsor, Brampton Brick, for making this program possible. So that's all for this edition of Straight Talk. Thank you all so much for watching, and stay safe out there. Thank you.